Hey, what's good, everyone? Twisted here with Open Sorcery, and today I am joined by my lovely co-host Devi once again, and we're going to be talking about the topic of Tsukumogami. Now, this is kind of like a follow-up to the previous conversation, or at least the previous monologue that I did on myself a while back about panpsychism and animism and places and things as being conscious. And I'll put a link in the description, most likely, so you can go ahead and check that out if you have not done so prior. However, when it comes to this particular topic, right, and how it relates to the previous one, in that panpsychism is the notion that things that are considered inanimate to us, right, such as rocks or grass or different items and all of that, have some sort of consciousness that is imbued into it, right? Because energy permeates everywhere. Energy is within various things and so far spread, and of course depending on your level of awareness you can detect it, if it's actually imbued into items or not. I know Debbie here can probably speak for herself and being quite a bit of an empath and being able to actually sense these sorts of things and all of that. But yeah, since you didn't necessarily go ahead and speak on panpsychism before, what about the general notion of inanimate objects having energy in them and thus potentially having consciousness and being alive in a sense?
Well, I might not have spoken on panpsychism directly. In the divination tools video, I actually did speak about how they have their own personality, and I do believe that kind of fits one into the other. But yes, everything has an energy about it, and the more attention you feed it, and the more that thing is used, the more energy it gains. It's like a um you start a snowball at the top of a hill, right? You can roll it a little bit and it'll stop, but you continue rolling it, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually it will take off on its own versus you having to put force behind it. Um but just about everything has its own energy. The only thing I would say that really doesn't, and this may be more controversial, I would say is things that are plastic. There is something about plastics that it doesn't hold energy like that. It doesn't um oh my gosh, what would you say? Uh it doesn't retain it. It doesn't uh resonate with it. That's what I was thinking. Um in a way that glass or metal or stone does. Um but that would be my own personal experience with it.
Well, that's something we're going to be going ahead and getting into and all of that. Now, harkening back to panpsychism and animism, something that also was mentioned was Shinto and their notion of kami, right?
Mm.
In the sense that places and things, they of themselves, have their own manner of consciousness or that they have their own level of godhood, right?
Mhm.
Kami being the Japanese word for God, and that could be in a major sense, in a minor sense, anything in between. Any sort of spirit usually gets the title of kami when it comes to Japanese folklore and such. And that is what we're going to be going ahead and diving into is the particular notion of Tsukumogami, right?
Mhm.
And when it comes to Tsukumogami, it is coming from in terms of the Japanese and translating to English. It happens to be a tool god, or the number 99 is what it roughly translates into. And the latter one, 99, comes from the belief that when an object becomes 100 years old, it manifests a spirit and it comes alive. So, when it comes to that, right? Like a lot of times it's personal possessions and household items, whether it be the plastics that you went ahead and mentioned, And granted, back when the folklore was initially established, it didn't have plastics or anything like that. But like, say a water canteen that was like made out of bamboo or something like that, or you know, some sort of pipe, or some sort of like poster, or ribbon, or anything that may have gone ahead and been treated with care or attention, or just a lot of energy put into it, and all of that these sorts of things could eventually develop a consciousness after 100 years or so of existence in a particular form and being recognized as such. And um, I think that plastics in that definition probably would have the potential to go ahead and adopt a particular consciousness, from having been interacted. Now, granted, plastics are a newer sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
In terms of human development of this sort of material, and with that, right? It's definitely been a longer than 100 years, I guess, since the beginning of us developing plastics in the first place. However, you know, um,
In the grand scheme of things, it's
to
it's
what
young.
yeah, exactly. And to what extent, right, does plastics have, how do they get treated with care? Things that are considered plastic, because a lot of things that are considered plastic, like, there's like, say, for example, like a Barbie doll or something, right? Or some sort of action figure. I might go ahead and get attention and care, but how much is the lifespan of it in relation to how long it's been around? But a lot of the plastics that, that are made happen to go ahead and we throw it out, or we put it into the recycle bin, and then it gets sent to a landfill and or a recycling center and gets repurposed, and it doesn't necessarily have a singular identity for an extended period of time, as opposed to other items that in yesteryear were crafted to be held and to be kept for longer periods of time.
Hmm.
So I think if there's any sort of sense to it, that probably is that it's, once again, younger. It hasn't been around as long or as cherished, and a lot of times the mindset, more so of a modern mindset in relation to these items, but it's not necessarily that there's a lack of potential to them potentially being Tsukumogami in this sort of thing, if that notion is to be believed as possible and or an actual occurrence. And what
Yep.
say you?
I don't disagree, but personal experience, right? Even like, let's say I'm going to the store and I'm getting something that was just crafted, right? Just came off the production line. There is something wooden, there is something glass, there is something stone, there is something metal. There is a reverberation within the metal, the glass, the stone, the wood that doesn't reside in the plastic. Um, you know how we've spoken about this is going to be a whole other conversation about like AI and how I feel AI is hollow.
Yes.
It feels very much that a form but nothing behind it, whereas the others feel fuller. And now that may be the sense that it doesn't have as much history because people have been using glass for a long time. Glasses, ceramics, clay, stone, you know, metals, wood, things of that nature, and especially wood because wood was alive at some point.
Yes.
So it has its own reverberation. But it could be that. I will absolutely give you the benefit of the doubt on that one. But in plastics, I know like we use a lot of like single use plastics, like plastic silverware, whatnot. Um or styrofoam or things of that nature. But there's something with it that it doesn't feel right to me. And that's like I said, that is personal. I'm not necessarily sure what it is about the plastics that doesn't feel right, but I can just say it doesn't hold energy in the way the others do. Now, it may be, like I said, more of a maturity type thing, whereas these are more mature materials versus something brand new, but that's my experience.
Oh yes, yes. And like I would go ahead and like put a notion to say that, granted, this may not necessarily be in line with the original idea or concept of Tsukumogami, but like say modern cell phone devices that aren't just plastic itself, but they have electronic circuits and all that sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Through attention and use, whether you think that the old belief that you had to have 100 years and it would go ahead and develop a consciousness on its own or not. That maybe it's not necessarily taking 100 years, maybe a shorter span of time in some cases, depending on how much attention and care you put into it, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
for example, you know, I would say for like cell phones, right? They're made in at least in older cell phones, or lesser, like not necessarily flagship phones of like Apple iPhones or Samsung Galaxies or anything like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they're made of plastic on the outside. Sure, they have circuitry inside, but that right there going ahead and taking on energy potentially. That even, yes, the circuitry is in there, but the plastic isn't necessarily impeding that energy, and that you could potentially have a kumogami of something that is plastic and something else. If because we're putting so much attention into our technology, into our phones, right? That if we go ahead and do so, that we can go ahead and potentially craft a Tsukumogami or give life to it and all of that. You know, that's just one idea potentially now. Granted, it's not a pure plastic item, but we can go ahead and name all the plastic items that we can. And but the point being is like I have experience for myself, a sort of symbiotic relationship with my phone and other technological items before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that may be a topic in of itself for another time or something like that. But just generally speaking, like it being made out of plastic, that didn't necessarily it's not as if
Yeah.
like, oh yes, it had to be made of metal completely and that
Oh, no, no,
plastic
no, no, no.
was inhibiting it.
No, that's not what I'm stating at all. And in fact, if I remember correctly, our a lot of the computer chips and things like that actually have like quartz in them, which we know quartz crystals and whatnot. Like that's kind of known as an energy conductor, and like it absorbs like a whole bunch of energy and whatnot. So it's
Oh yes.
I would think that the plastic, yes, is possibly to a detriment, but like I said, that's it's more of like this is my been my experience versus a universal truth kind of thing.
Oh yes. But in going down that route, I think it actually serves as a good segue to go ahead and bring up a notion that I wanted to bring your way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Tsukumogami, these are items that through attention, through care, through focusing on, develop their own manner of consciousness and all this sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether through the actual intention that you want to create a living being with the item or a living item or not, and it just being passive, passed through generations or however long it takes to process in all actuality. But in mentioning phones and technological devices and that there being quartz crystals in them, would quartz crystals or any other crystals for that matter potentially be considered Tsukumogami if held for a long enough time in developing a manner of consciousness from focus and attention and all that sort of thing, and not necessarily just like a person just getting a crystal and then possessing itself, but like something that has been going on for an elongated period of time, and all of that. That either they have the potential to become Tsukumogami, or that they already are in a sense. If we're going by the definition of
Okay.
that.
Okay, I could see that. But with that, I would think that they already are in a sense. Especially with how crystals like they already have their own vibrations. They have their own personalities. Like I'll put it this way. I will go into a crystal shop or I'll go into an antique store um, that happens to have like booths that sell crystals or whatnot, and I will look over them. But there will be some that catch my eye because they already have that energy about them. They already have that personality that's saying, hey, we vibe together. I'm coming home with you. That kind of thing. Um, but I would say it becomes more pronounced with human interaction, whereas it may be more dormant and may not necessarily dormant, but just kind of less obvious at first. Um, but this is also like I am a sensitive. That's kind of what I do. Because I have literally had crystals like vibrate in my hands, and it feels like it is moving. It is not um just a small tickle or anything. Like it's physically moving in my hands. Um to let me know like, hey, this is mine. This is coming with me. Or immediate bad feelings of no, we don't go together. I don't vibe with you. You don't vibe with me. I need a restraining order. And I've had crystals that give me that kind of feeling. I'm like, I'm not looking your way anymore. I'm sorry. My bad. Um, so interesting concept, interesting way to think about it. But I would say they already are because of the fact of how they are formed and the energy that they hold, and it's just they get more pronounced and maybe more of a personality the more that people work with them.
Oh yes, yes, and that I definitely can agree that there probably are like many crystals that are either they just in the sense of panpsychism already have consciousness, or because of people passing them around and putting attention focus into them for like an elongated period of time or however long, that they have developed a consciousness and more so the Tsukumogami sort of framework and perspective on it. But I wanted to go ahead and not necessarily just like natural materials, what have you, or at least limiting it to that for things such as crystals, but to the notion of, say, amulets and talismans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things that we craft for particular purposes, which, thus far, in terms of by the time that this conversation goes up, we'll have touched on in the sigils and symbols conversation we had a while back, but also, for us to discuss in the future as well. But saving that for that particular time, getting in depth. But I want to ask, when it comes to amulets and talismans, do you think that those have potential to become Tsukumogami and all of that, however long it takes, 100 years or a shorter frame of time or what have you?
When you apply magic to an object, you are going to cut the time that it becomes conscious, like the time that it takes to become conscious, like in half. So I would not say that it would take, the 100 years or the 99 years um, to become that, because when you are putting that intention on something, it is not just like I'm taking a knife and it's part of my trade to um like we're cutting up leathers every day. Or we're skinning things to sell leathers and sell skins and whatnot. Or butcher animals. And that becomes a Tsukumogami after 100 years because that was the purpose that it fulfilled, but it had no real intent other than, okay, we're sharpening it to make sure that it can glide through. It's my trusty blade. It's helping me live. It's helping me do my trade, my profession, but it's not taken further than that. You know what I mean? When you take it
Yes.
to the level of you're holding it in the physical, but you're manipulating it in the spiritual. It's like the two sides of the coin, right? Because I'm one that lives in between. One foot here, one foot on the other side. When you're manipulating it on both sides, the time that it is taking to gain consciousness of its own is just on warp speed because you are imbuing it with so much attention and intention that it can't not be alive in a sense, if that makes any sense. I think I did like a bunch of word
Yes.
salad there.
You're good. You're good.
Okay. But
But
with
yes.
with that, with like amulets and talismans and things of that nature, think of it this way: you're almost creating this small altar that you either like wear on your person or have in your home, right? You are creating this thing, and this thing is supposed to protect you. So what are you going to do when you feel like you're in danger? You're going to grip it. I bet you 9 times out of 10 you're going to hold that thing that's on your neck, and you're going to be talking to it. Anytime you feel nervous, every time you feel like something is going on, you're going to grip it. You're going to talk to it because that's what they're for. And you're just pouring more and more and more energy into it, and it will become conscious eventually. And it's like creating your own personal guardian deity.
Yes. And when you said gripping onto something on your neck and all that, I immediately think of someone having a cross on their neck or something of
Exactly.
that nature.
Because it's a
Yes.
talisman.
What?
I know.
Nani?
Nani?
Yes. But something else in the realm of, say, magically used items and tools that I happen to think of that may be considered as Tsukumogami, or maybe they already had their own manner of consciousness from materials that they're derived from, or what have you, is divinatory tools, right?
Hmm.
And like this also goes ahead, and before you get into that, I do want to go ahead and mention the idea of whether it's with amulets or talismans or divinatory tools, right? Like, you know, actually, I'll let you speak on it, and then I'll go ahead and I'll present a different question and query
Okay.
for you. But yes, for divination tools, what do you think in
So,
terms of potential of them being Tsukumogami?
yes, they are. And like I said at the very beginning of this, like I already spoke on this in um divination tools, or talking about magical tools overall, because you will find that they have their own personalities, and there is a specific way that each, like if we're talking tarot specifically, each deck will speak to you in a different way, and some of them are freaking savages, and all they want to do is hurt your feelings, and they're just like, okay, you asked for it, look upon this and be skewered. um and it will hurt your feelings.
That
And
sounds like it comes from a
yes,
personal place.
there is actual
Sounds like
hurt
it comes from
there.
a
I am
personal place.
staring at a particular deck, and yes, it knows what it did. You know what you did, Bianca. You know what you did. um
the tarot deck's name is Bianca.
Apparently. It was a name that just kind of popped up out of nowhere, I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, I guess you have a tarot deck named Bianca. There we
I
go.
do. And she's my favorite bitch. But it's fine. Um, but each of them is going to speak to you in a different way. Like there will be one that is super kind and coddling. It's almost like the friend that sits there and is just like, it's gonna be okay. Like, yes, you did messed up, but it's gonna be okay. Like, we're gonna focus on the brighter side of life. Yes, you messed up, but you know. And then there's ones that are just like, okay, We're laying it out. I'm your honest friend right now. You fucked up. This is how you fucked up. This is how you're going to continue to fuck up if you keep on this path. And this is what it's going to end up as. Like, it, it's
Yes.
it's different personalities. It's just like when you're speaking to your friends, and you always have the one that, like, when you are in a funk, it's like, I'm going to go to that one because they make me feel good. They know how to pick me up and let me um feel like a person again instead of feeling like a failure. And then there's the one that's actually going to help you get stuff done. And the one that helps me get stuff done, that is Bianca. I'm making
Yes.
you a name tag, by the way. I hope you don't mind.
But yes, so divinatory tools, and not just tarot cards, but obviously that can be runes, that can be, pendulums, I guess,
Oh, yes.
a vast variety of different things that could potentially be Tsukumogami or are Tsukumogami
Oh, absolutely.
and
My
all of
first,
that.
I will
Yes,
state this. My first set of runes, I still possess them, right? I got them when I was
yes,
14 years old. That was a long ass time ago. Okay? These runes, within the first 6 months of me using them, within the first 6 freaking months, I was doing readings for friends and acquaintances just to get myself more acquainted with it and get to feeling with it better. And there was this one particular girl. She had asked me a question like a week before about a boy, and of course, she comes back and she held the question in her mind instead of letting me know out loud. And then I remember flipping over the runes and I'm just like, they are pissed off at you right now. You went back to him, didn't you? And she just looked at me like, how did you know?
yes. The big takeaway I'm getting from all that is, of course, going ahead and using divination to ask about, oh my god, like, tell me about this guy.
I mean, at 14, 15 years old, like, let's be real. Um
You say at 14 or 15, but it still happens when not just women, but people in general hit their 20s and 30s
well, it
and
does.
40s and
It
50s
does because
and so on.
partnership partnership is a huge point of life. Um and I and this is side tangent and I'm going to go on it because it needs to be said. Um Society as we have it today is so fucked up because it has taken the focus away from the home and from what life is all about, which is living. It's not about what can I do as a career. It's about experiencing life to the fullest and creating life and having it continue versus this I live specifically to become a corporate cog. Let's not. But I
Yes.
digress.
Oh, yes. And, and us having tackled, amulets and talismans and different magical tools that could be utilized as Tsukumogami, being a living item, an inanimate object that has a manner of consciousness or being within it, right?
Mhm.
You know, got to go ahead and talk about thought forms, which of course is another topic that I went ahead and covered myself individually previously, quite a while ago. But when it comes to different varieties of thought forms, right? You know, creating them. You can create a servitor, you can create an egregore, and one more so being along the lines of an individual creator with servitors. And egregores usually more so of kind of like a group project. Doesn't have to necessarily be, but just more so along the lines of how people go ahead and generate them.
Mhm.
But the idea of a lot of people imbuing amulets or talismans as their tools with servitors or egregores, would you say that in of itself is, with more so intention, constructing a Tsukumogami and all of that?
Yes, I would say a Sakumogami is just another word for probably I would say egregore because it was a thought form for so long And thought forms are more like, well, I would say it was a servitor for so long that it graduated. It graduated to consciousness. It graduated to the ability to kind of think for itself, right? Instead of being used, just being a tool, being a servitor, not having a say in the function that it serves. It decided, okay, now is today the day that we wake up. Um, so I would say that they're kind of interchangeable, and I know that that sounds bad because that's kind of putting Western terms on Eastern thought, but at the same time, I think a lot of spirituality is finding new ways to describe the same fucking thing.
Oh yes, yes. And speaking of that, right? Going ahead and trying to find modern examples of Tsukumogami. And yes, this being a Japanese Shinto term that we are using to go ahead and portray and present this concept and idea. But and with that, right? Let's go ahead and start with some examples of anime, right? That happen to have Tsukumogami in them, including the anime called Tsukumogami. That came out within the past 5 years or so, and I've seen it. Pretty dang good. There's also another one that I actually haven't seen, but I'm aware of and is like on my watch list is Mononogatari, and that one also being about Tsukumogami, and apparently in a different way than the uh, show Tsukumogami itself, but I have yet to experience it. Now, something that people who may be listening are more likely probably familiar with, and I know you're more so familiar with, Devi, is Pokemon, with
Mm-hmm.
the vast amount of different creatures that are featured on there and all of that, and quite a few of them that are objects and such that happen. We can go ahead and say are potentially Tsukumogami or are Tsukumogami. Now, before I get into a slew of them, right? Not going to mention all of them, but I think the most infamous one, or at least the theory or idea for this one, is that of Voltorb being a Tsukumogami, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you watch Pokemon, of course, you got to catch them all. And how do you catch them? With Pokeballs. And the idea, the concept is that a Pokeball, if you go ahead and you have it for long enough, it'll turn to a Voltorb. Now, I do have an excerpt from another webpage online that I can go ahead and link, which talks about this theory of Voltorb becoming a Tsukumogami. So let me go ahead and read that real quick. It is said that Voltorb is Tsukumogami, which means that it is an object that came to life on its 100th birthday. This is also hinted because its Pokedex number is 100. If this is true, does that mean any Pokemon that becomes 100 will become a Tsukumogami? Any Pokeball that becomes 100 will become a Tsukumogami? If this is true, then does it also mean that a Pokemon inside will become trapped within the Voltorb, or will it be released back into the wild? And according to Dex entries, Voltorb was first discovered in factories at around the same time as Pokeballs were first introduced. So, what say you, Debbie? Are Voltorbs just Tsukumogami, Pokeballs made as Tsukumogami, developing and evolving into it?
Possibly. I hadn't thought about that before, but that makes a lot of sense with like the newer gen Pokemon coming out with the freaking it's a goddamn lamp. What the fuck? Um
Oh, yes, yes, yes. A lot of the more so newer gen ones. There's quite a few Tsukumogami, but yes, you think Voltorb specifically, and thus its evolution electrode are actually living Pokeballs.
I mean, the possibility is there. It is, it's an anime universe. So, it's one of those things of, okay, I could see it pulling from the folklore around it. Okay. I could see it.
Yes, yes. Now, in there's plenty of different items, or item-based Pokemon I can go ahead and mention, including one that's literally like a set of keys and all that. I don't remember the name, but a group. that went ahead and kind of caught my eye and was like, go ahead and mention it. And also, I kind of want to go on a side tangent because of it, of Pokemon really running out of ideas. Is that of a couple Pokemon called Sinistea and Poltegeist, which are kind of like animated tea kettles that are like ghost and grass type, I believe. But yes, yes, I know, right?
You know what it is? It's fucking Mrs. Potts and Chip. That's what the fuck.
Okay, what is that? I'm gonna need a lesson. I think the folks out there may need a lesson. What exactly is
Beauty
that?
and the Beast. Oh my gosh.
Oh, okay, got you, got
Yes.
you. You know what? I actually had that. I wanted to go ahead and mention that for a Western example and all of that, but let's get through the Pokemon, then we can go ahead and talk about
Okay.
that a bit more. But yes, so not only is there Sinistea and Poltegeist, but in terms of at this time of recording and likely this episode being released, there's also another T ghost Pokemon that is supposed to come out. So I already mentioned Sinistea and Poltegeist that are part of the evolutionary line, right? Well, apparently they have one coming out called Poltergeist as well.
Oh,
Yes.
it's
And that coming out
matcha.
with the Teal Mask DLC for the latest generation of Pokemon games and such. But yeah, so yeah, Pokemon's running out of ideas, and I think it's blatantly obvious at this point.
Mm-hmm. No, but
Yeah.
but
Uh,
while we shift from Pokemon to Beauty and the Beast, look up Mrs. Potts and Chip, and you'll see exactly what I mean in terms of
well, if it's
Sinistea and
well, if it's
Poltegeist.
from okay, well, if it's from Beauty and the Beast, then I think I know which one you're referring to, and I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
go ahead and actually before you went ahead and said it in terms of like a list of examples of like so for those who have not seen Beauty and the Beast, if you haven't thus far, the actual like story behind it is not necessarily in line with the theory of Tsukumogami, but it provides an example of them in terms of the items being living and such, right? So, if you haven't seen Beauty and the Beast, here you go. Generally speaking, you know, there are side characters in there that happen to be, as Debbie was referring to, a living teapot or tea kettle. There's like a living candle, a living armoire, a living clock, all these different sorts of things. And, the idea is that they were servants to the beast character, right? And the curse that was put upon him and that they were transformed into these objects, and of course they want to be able to turn back into humans and all of that, alongside the beast himself, not necessarily wanting to be a beast and all of that, but alas, you know but it's a good western representation of the Tsukumogami concept, and them dancing around, prancing around, helping out the main characters of Belle and the Beast and all of that. But yes, please go on and talk about Mrs. Chip and the rest of the good old characters in Beauty and the Beast and their relationship to Kumogami concept.
Okay, so for the Tsukumogami concept, it I guess this would be like the reversed in a sense where um so Tsukumogami, um what we had watched earlier, to make sure that we're fresh on the information, talked about the two different kind of
Yes.
concepts, right? One was of ascension, one was of whenever the object reaches 100 years old, then it is able to be um like it is able to be conscious, right? So I would say that it's a thing of ascension. But there was another thought that things should be thrown out after 99 years, so that they don't get possessed, because things that are 100 years old can be possessed. And I think this would kind of fall into line with the other thought of possession, where it's like making the human spirit possess an object. Um,
Oh
Even though
yes.
it's like becoming in the story of Beauty and the Beast, but I think it would fall in line to the in the line of the possession thought, because while Japanese thought, yes, they have kami, um, they also have yokai, right?
Yes.
And if we're gonna be, blatantly honest here, that would be probably the equivalent for us between like gods and angels grouped as one, and then demons grouped as the other. And that
Yes.
is and always will be completely subjective,
Oh yes.
in my
Perception
opinion.
based and or
Absolutely.
lore based.
Yes. So with that, in the tale of Beauty and the Beast, um, he gets to occupy the body of man, bear, pig, um, lion, thing, scraggly, buffalo. I think is thrown in there somewhere too, um, and his
I,
servants.
I don't know exactly. I don't know exactly what the beast is, but I don't think he's gonna say man bear pig. That's South Park.
I know I'm being sarcastic, but
Yes, but please continue.
with his servants kind of being thrown under the bus, and because they enabled him, although he was fucking 11. I say it again for emphasis,
Yes,
11.
yes, yes. Pound on that table for emphasis.
I
Yes,
did, and I hurt my hand, okay?
good
But
job.
I know, right?
Yeah, go on.
Because they enabled his behavior, they also got wrapped up in the punishment of, okay, you no longer have your human form. You have to um, figure out how to live life as an object. And since you objectified yourself for this person who is beastly in nature, you now become an object. It's kind of interesting when you think about it that way. By the way, Beauty and the Beast is one of my favorite Disney movies. So that like it's funny that you were
Oh
gonna
yes,
bring that one up, because that's like I could watch that back to back, no joke. Um,
oh yes,
but yeah, I like I said, I think it falls in line with the thought of possession versus the more positive aspect of Tsukumogami.
oh yes. And you know what? I think that it. I agree with you in that sort of sense. And I have one more thought. This was not necessarily something I actually thought to bring up beforehand, but it just came to me. And yeah, I don't know. I may go ahead and try to force a pun here, but it's something that not only came to me, but something that by using it you can come into,
Oh no.
and that being like sex dolls and all
Oh
that. If we're going to
no.
talking about a Japanese concept, and granted, a lot of people here in the U.S. and in the West use them as well, but go ahead and ask a question of, can sex dolls potentially become Tsukumogami
I
by the
don't want
amount of
to
times
answer
that
that
you go ahead and
question.
you
Answer that question. No. Okay. Okay. So I am going to talk about dolls overall. Okay. And I am going to bleach that thought from my brain. Okay. I am going to
go
pretend that
go
shh,
for it. Go
shh.
for it.
I'm going to pretend you didn't say that. Okay. So, with that, dolls, hollow objects, things of that nature, um, even if they are plastic, that is where I believe possession can come into play pretty much at any time, because they're hollow. There's nothing in there, so it's easily manipulatable. Um, I am going to choose to completely and totally ignore um, that other comment. I don't want to know. I really, really, really don't. Bleh.
Well, if it happens, well, okay, so hey, if it happens to work for regular dolls, then is it just fair to say that it works for sex dolls as well, without getting into too much detail? Or maybe in not as much of a cringe-inducing or a horrifying manner for you right now, but how about anime body pillows? How about those? You think those can become Tsukumogami?
It hurts.
So yes, folks, if you give enough love and attention and
Bleh.
care to your sex dolls or your anime body pillows, they may become Tsukumogami. I think that's a wonderful place that we go ahead and we cap this off.
I'm so nauseous.
So there we go. Yes, you have to deal with your newfound nausea.
You're
So yeah,
wrong for that.
any
You are
additional.
wrong for that in all ways. You
But yeah, so any closing thoughts?
Twisted Man bad. That is the only thought I have right
Okay, yes, I guess Twisted Man is in fact bad for that one. But
now.
hey, I think it's as fitting of an end as any.
Fair, but
Just
it
as
scrubbed
just
any
as
kind
it
of
may be.
educational thought I might have had in my head where it was just like, oh hey, deep philosophical thought, not semi-sentient um pocket pussies. I'm just like, huh?
Yes, yes.
Huh? Dude, brr, huh, brr,
But yes, it's a wrap.
It
It's a wrap.
yep,
That's all,
yep,
folks.
that
All right. So yes, this has been Twisted, and
Devi.
yes, and glad that you guys were able to listen in. And if you're getting to this point, you're able to hear us talk about sex dolls and anime body pillows potentially developing a manner of consciousness. So yes, Dave Frosty nieces and peace.
Great night, y'all.